Welcome to this note-taking listening practice. Today, we will examine vertical farming and its potential role in the future of global food production. Before the lecture begins, please take a look at the 5 subheadings on your screen to help structure your notes. You can also download the complete note-taking outline as a free PDF from the description below. Get your pen and paper ready, and let's begin.
Good morning, everyone. I want to start with a number that might surprise you. By 2050, the world's population is expected to reach nearly 10 billion people. At the same time, climate change is making traditional farmland less productive, water is becoming harder to find in many regions, and around 30% of all food produced in the world is wasted before it even reaches someone's plate. These problems are pushing scientists, engineers, and governments to ask a serious question. How do we feed more people when we have less land, less water, and a less stable climate? One answer that has been getting a lot of attention recently is vertical farming. So what exactly is vertical farming? Simply put, it means growing crops in stacked layers inside controlled indoor spaces. Warehouses, old office buildings, shipping containers, or purpose-built towers, instead of in traditional outdoor fields. The idea is not brand new. In 1999, Dr. Dixon Despommier, a professor at Columbia University, suggested that skyscraper-sized indoor farms could be built in cities to feed people without needing so much rural farmland. At the time, most people thought it was just a fantasy. But 20 years later, commercial vertical farms are running in more than 50 countries, and the industry is now worth over $5 billion.
How does it actually work? What makes it different from a regular greenhouse?
Good question. A regular greenhouse uses natural sunlight and usually has just one level. Vertical farming goes much further in 2 ways. It stacks growing areas on top of each other, and it controls the entire growing environment using technology. Let me explain the 3 main technologies involved. The first is called hydroponics. In a hydroponic system, plants grow without soil. Instead, their roots sit in or are regularly flooded with water that contains all the nutrients the plant needs. This means you do not need large areas of land, and you can control exactly what the plant gets. The second technology is aeroponics, which takes this idea even further. In aeroponic systems, the plant roots hang in the air and are sprayed with a fine mist of nutrients at regular intervals. This uses dramatically less water than hydroponics, up to 95% less than traditional farming. And the roots also get more oxygen, which helps plants grow faster. The third key technology is LED lighting. Since vertical farms have no windows or natural light, they use artificial lights instead. Modern LEDs can be set to produce specific colors of light. Red and blue light are the most effective for plant growth. This means crops can grow 24 hours a day, in any season, in any location. A vertical farm in the middle of a desert or in the Arctic can produce exactly the same crops as one in the most fertile farming region in the world.
That sounds incredibly efficient. What are the main environmental benefits?
The environmental case for vertical farming is genuinely strong in several areas. First, land use. Traditional farming takes up about 50% of all the usable land on Earth. Because vertical farms grow upward instead of outward, they can produce the same amount of food using up to 99% less land. In theory, this would allow farmland to be returned to nature. Forests could grow back, wildlife could return, and the land could absorb carbon again. Water efficiency is another major advantage. Farming is responsible for roughly 70% of all the fresh water used globally. Vertical farms recirculate their water continuously, losing very little through evaporation. As I mentioned, Aeroponic systems can cut water use by up to 95% compared to open field farming. In parts of the world where water is already running short, the Middle East, parts of Africa, or the American Southwest, this could make a real difference. Vertical farms also use almost no pesticides. Because the growing environment is sealed and fully controlled, there are no insects, no plant diseases from the soil, and no weeds. And because these farms are usually built in or near cities, food does not need to travel long distances to reach consumers. Truly local food production becomes possible at a meaningful scale for the first time.
This all sounds almost too good. What are the downsides?
The biggest problem is energy. Because vertical farms use artificial lighting around the clock, as well as heating, cooling, and automated systems, they consume a huge amount of electricity. Some studies have found that vertical farms use up to 100 times more energy per kilogram of food than conventional outdoor farming. With electricity prices as they are, and with many national grids still running largely on fossil fuels, this makes vertical farming both expensive and, in some cases, worse for the climate than traditional farming. The cost impact is significant. A head of lettuce grown in a vertical farm typically costs 2 to 4 times more to produce than one grown in a field. This is why vertical farming has so far only really worked for high-value, fast-growing crops, things like lettuce, spinach, herbs, and microgreens. Staple crops like wheat, rice, and potatoes, the foods that feed the majority of the world's population, are simply not economically viable to grow indoors at the moment. The energy cost is just too high relative to what those crops are worth. Several major vertical farming companies have also run into serious financial trouble. Aerofarms, once seen as a leader in the field, filed for bankruptcy in 2023. AppHarvest, a large indoor farming company in the United States, collapsed the same year. These failures show that while the technology works, the business model is still very fragile. Looking ahead, the future of vertical farming will probably depend on two things. First, the falling cost of renewable energy. As solar and wind power get cheaper, the energy problem becomes less serious. Some farms are already being built with solar panels on the roof, which helps reduce both costs and carbon emissions. Second, developments in plant science. Breeding crop varieties that are specifically designed for indoor conditions, needing less light and producing more food per plant. So, to wrap up, vertical farming is not a magic solution to the world's food problems, but it is not just an expensive experiment either. For cities, for high-value crops, and in regions where land and water are scarce, it has a real and growing role to play. Whether it can ever be scaled up to feed billions of people on staple crops remains an open question, one that will depend as much on energy policy and investment as on the technology itself. That brings us to the end of today's lecture. Thank you all for your time and active participation. Have a great day, and I will see you in our next class.
All right, it is time to test your notes. Answer the following questions and check your score. Good luck! That concludes today's listening session. To stay updated with our next videos, make sure to subscribe. Thank you for watching and see you next time. Bye for now.